Welcome back, folks, to the brush. Today we're going to put the last two videos into some kind of perspective. Going to work on my gantry panels this episode. I've only got these three out, but there are others. I'm just going to run through basically how I prep them for the next stage of them masking and then the final paint job. So the first thing I'm going to start with is I've got some enamel thinners in a small jar, and to that I'm going to add some of the brown pigment so that hopefully I've got a darker base colour to start with. I'm not going to add too much, just enough to tint the wall or tint the enamel thinners so that it will give a nice brown wash. Don't want a huge amount on the brush. You want to do this in a well ventilated area purely because this stuff is toxic, it's carcinogenic, and you want to have it in a well ventilated area. I'd normally have a vapor mask on, but I've got the window open so that I can hopefully vent the smell. And all I'm going to do is just brush this brown layer over virtually the entire surface, just to pick out the recesses, the details. It gives something to focus the eye on once the masking's been done, and this brown layer doesn't tend to come away. It tends to be more the rust colours that we put on subsequently that tend to be more volatile and move. So I don't need to be too precise with this. I'm just going to effectively flood the plate with it. I'm not too worried. That's those ones done. I might have just enough to do this one. I might have to mix some more up. So what I use is Humbrol enamel thinners. Last one. So normally I'd do this outside or in my garage. Certainly wouldn't do it in the house. I am doing it in the house this time, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I've got all the windows open so that this vents quite quickly. It doesn't fill the whole house up with enamel thinner fumes. So you definitely want to have the windows open before you start doing this, because the smell is quite atrocious. So now that I've got the brown on there, just darkens up those panels a little bit. Now I can switch out to applying some of the rust colours that I want. I'm going to start with the red, and all I'm going to do is dip my brush into a bit of the powder, into some thinners, and then I'm just literally going to attack and dab some of this on the surface. I don't need to be particularly precise with it. I don't need to worry about where I'm applying it as such. I try to keep it away from the details if I can, but it will spread itself out quite nicely and it will blend in itself as long as the surface isn't already too dry. So just add in some to give random colours in places. That's all I'm doing with this. Now at the moment it doesn't look too vibrant, doesn't look too over the top, but as the enamel thinners dries, it tends to become a lot more distinct and a lot more obvious. And you may have thought when you've done it, what the hell have I done? Have I messed this up? What have I done to my models? Because it will look very, very extreme. I'll show you that in just a sec. Yeah, I'm going to use some of the previous colour just to wash the brush before I switch out to the next colour. And I have got a small tub of cleaned enamel thinners just so that I can rinse the brush out and try not to get too many different colours going at once. It kind of helps to work these things down. I'm using it on a cutting board that I can clean up afterwards, so I'm not too fussed. The orange is a little bit more bright, shall I say, in the extreme, especially once it's dry. At this stage it doesn't look too manic, but it does start to look quite intense once it's dried in. I need a bit more colour, a bit more liquid access. That'll do. After all, I don't want these being I don't particularly want these looking too bland. I want them to look brighter and more vibrant, and at the moment it looks a bit sort of dirty, but you'll see what I mean. As these dry, you'll get much brighter colours. I'm just going to go straight into the pigment. Don't need it everywhere, just random. Don't even need to be precise with it, because what we're going to do after this is mask it up and then paint over it in a different colour, and the masking will tear most of the pigment back off of it when we're finished, but that'll do. I've got enough colour on there. I'll put the lids back on all the jars so we don't vent the house full of fumes, that it can vent out to the outside world. I do leave it on the brush because ultimately, as the enamel thinners dry off, it will vaporise. I've got a couple of panels I can show you that have already had this process done. These ones are dry. The next step for these is to put the thinners, or to put the masking on, and once the masking is done, we can then paint over the top of those, but we'll come back to that in the next step and show you what these look like when they're dry. Hopefully folks, that gives you a quick view of what the panels look like now that they're dry. You can see how the enamel thinners is evaporated off, leaving the pigment powders behind. And as you can see, as I said about the orange, the very light rust colour has really gone to town as it's dried. So now that these are dried, we can mask them up and we can move on to the next stage, which I'll show you in the next part. Right, since the last part of the video, what I've done is I've masked up all the tiles. I'll show you them at the end so you can see just how many have been done. I've got through more than a couple of bottles of Maskol doing this, but to show you the process from start to finish, the Maskol, once it's dried, will rub off like rubber bands. So I can literally just roll it up and get rid of it. I tend to keep these bits for helping cleaning up stuff later. It helps to have something to rub stuff abrasively against. Just going to put a little bit of Maskol out on sponge that I'd already used previously. Just tear the end off so that I've got a brand new fresh surface to use. Actually, I think that sponge is getting a little bit past it. Maybe need to get another bit. Let's see. Maybe sufficient. It's getting a little bit past it, but it's enough. So all I'm going to do, I'll bring it over so it's better in sight, is just sponge on some of the Maskol to partially cover up some of the rust and also some of the bare metal. I just want a variation in the tone and quality and coverage of it, so that we end up with something that looks a bit more visually interesting at the end. Now that I've done that, what I need to do is fill in the little gaps that I've got left. Now what I'm going to do is start off clearing up from what I've got left on the palette, and what I'm going to use is a dental pick, sometimes referred to as an awl, but those of you that have been to the dentist will remember this implement as it scratches around your teeth. But this is what I use to dab in and dot in the remaining Maskol. The reason I use it is it gives me the control. It doesn't wear away the tip. It's got a nice sharp spike on the end of it, and it cleans off easily enough without leaving any mess behind. Now I've just got to go around and finish all of this off. Now I'll do that off camera so I'm not wasting your time. But a couple of other things that I found out is that the large vents can be covered with one of the, I think it's the 25mm base, and it's just the right size that it will cover up the exhaust vent in these pads. It literally fits right on top, so that's where that's going to sit whilst I spray it up. The other one, I'm literally going to fill in the gaps with some Maskol and show you in a few minutes what it looks like. So that's the last tiles actually masked up. What I've done on this one, because there's an open vent on this side with the grate on it, I've just put a bit of masking tape underneath it to hold the Maskol in place underneath, and I've put a large base on this piece so that it covers up the vented duct, and I've done the same with all the other pieces. Now what I need to do, I don't need to actually let it dry, it's good enough to spray over the top of right now, but what I need to do is go and spray these. So these are going to go get a coat of Zandri dust, followed by a variable patch of Wraithbone, so there's again some more tonal variation. And then when I come back, let those dry, I've then got to take the mask off, which is the next step that I'll show you. So Maskol's now dry. So now what we've got to do is remove the Maskol from these panels. I've sprayed them with Zandri dust and a little bit of Wraithbone over the top, just to give a little bit of variation in the colour tone. And now that what we've done is let the Maskol cure, we can remove any masking that we've got left. So I'm going to use the same tool that we used previously, the little dental pick, to remove this masking. Pull it all out. Once you've got it all out, we need to clear off the surface. So I'm just going to clear this section so you can see literally all I'm doing is picking it out with a pick. You will get lots of this purple goo everywhere. It is dry, but it's a pain in the neck, and you will need to probably hoover up the surface or the area you've worked in, as it will get everywhere. And I'll only show you briefly on this bit. But once we've got all of those bits out of that section, I'm going to get a large piece of the dried rubber and run it over the surface to remove any that are on the top of the panel. Just give it a light brush over. It will do most of the work for you. Change direction, come in at it from a different angle, attack it from several directions. The surface will clean up. I'll come back in a few seconds and show you once the whole surface is done. Just to give you some idea of the amount of debris we've created just with those 3 tiles, this will now need clearing up, and once I've cleared up, we'll be back. Now we've cleared off the Maskol, hopefully you can see how all these pieces have cleared up. There's still some metallic shine on them, but there is some paint, as in an upper painted layer that's worn away, and you can still see the rust tones, yet they're somewhat muted compared to what they were earlier. The last step, or second to last step we've got, is now that we've cleared off all the Maskol, what I'm going to do is give them a quick wash over with a 50-50 mix of Lahmian Medium and Griffin Sepia that I've already mixed up, because I've already done quite a few of these tiles. I'll show you those in a minute. And all I'm going to do is just gently brush this over with a large makeup brush. I'm trying not to disturb too much of that surface, and I'm also hoping to try and seal in some of those pigment powders that are still there. I don't want any pooling as such either. I want to try and stop that happening. And dab away at it, doesn't matter too much. The fact that it's a large, soft, bristled brush tends to help this process somewhat. Stops too much damage or attrition to the pigment layers that we've already put on. I will probably have to come back in at some point and paint this fan blade in the middle. Not happy I missed that one. One out of the whole patch isn't so much of a problem though. I tend to keep a small tub of this to one side, especially when I'm doing large projects like this, as you'll see. But having stippled that across the top of them, the last thing I'm going to do to the top of these is just in a few places dab in some Agrax just to the colour a little bit in a few places. Don't need a lot, just a few hints here and there. Just alters the pigment balance a little bit. Again, breaks up those colours, creates a little bit of variation in what we've already done. Possibly overdone it on that bit. It doesn't matter, it won't notice. Once those are dry, I'm going to come round and paint the edges of them yellow. But to give you some context, I've already produced quite a stack of tiles already done. To the same stage. Hopefully I can now move on to the next stage, which we'll cover in the next video. So I have been the Adept of the Brush. Thank you very much for watching. If you've liked what you've seen, please like and subscribe, it will help the channel grow. Thank you and goodbye.